Welcome back to Pioneers and Builders in the City of Jacksonville, or as we affectionately call it, PB and Jax. I'm your host, as always, Randall Thomas. Have an amazing guest, a great friend of mine, been a good friend for many a years, the CEO of Feature 23, Mr. Mike Potts. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Randall.
Yeah, man, you're very welcome. It's been 57, 58 episodes. We finally got you.
Yeah. I remember talking about this with you before episode 1, the concept, kind of what you were going for. So it's great to see it working. Glad to see the podcast growing for you.
Appreciate that very much, man. I want to talk a little bit about Feature 23, like where current state versus where it was when you started it. Maybe some of the pivots along the way. You can't be a small business owner without some pivots.
Yeah.
You know, the work you're doing in the middle markets, the work you're doing with AI. We'll talk about Jacksonville a little bit and then we'll close.
Yeah, fantastic.
Good. Feature 23, founded in 2008. Kind of a big deal in 2008. We were not doing so hot economically. And why did you think that was the right time?
You know, it's interesting. I didn't really pick 2008. I have a friend of mine, Brian Knight, who I've known a long time. And, I would say Brian and I were support for one another back before he started Pragmatic Works. And I got a funny story about the name Pragmatic Works. It goes back a ways between Brian and I, a bit of an inside joke. And he called me one day and said, hey, I know you've been thinking about going out on your own, and I think I have the perfect first client. And he married me with Jack Caven at Infotech. And Jack and I, we got along great. You know, we went through our feeling each other out paces, and we ended up doing business together. And Brian was right. He ended up being a fantastic first client. Cavens are still somebody who are very close to us. Very much appreciate Jack. And as a startup, Jack wasn't just my first client. He gave me great advice. He gave me unsolicited advice. He gave me, as an attorney himself, gave me legal advice when I needed it. And so Jack was always, he was a friend as much as he was a client. And so without Jack, I wouldn't be here.
All right. Shout out to Jack.
Absolutely.
For those that are learning about the Feature 23 and the Mike Potts name for the first time, there's going to be a couple listeners that have never heard of you or what you do.
Yeah.
As you signed Jack as a client, what were you doing for Jack? What services were you performing?
So initially, Jack had a technology-focused company with a particular focus in construction technology and sales. And Jack was trying to create a bit of a software factory. He had a lot of ideas. He was trying to move a little bit faster. And he was trying to move, I would say deliver at a speed which kind of aligns with Jack's ability to innovate. And so he started gathering some really smart people around him. And my initial task was to essentially create a software factory for Jack that would move at the speed he needed it to. He gave me the space that I needed to create a system, and then we set about creating some great software.
Yeah. And then 18 years later.
Yeah, 18 years later.
And a couple of pivots. Here we are. Yeah. Okay. So Feature 23, for the longest time and still a bit today, custom software.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's changed in its definition quite a bit. 2 decades ago, custom software was still very much an application development or programming set of tasks with some agile, Scrum, Kanban kind of thrown in there. It's evolved quite a bit. I would say the first big pivot was when you create a system of delivery and you go from kind of a, we'll call it a craft-based system to a bit of a software factory system. You develop a bit of a program, if you will, a playbook, much like an NFL team does. Mm-hmm. Yes, they're all playing football, but the Patriots don't play the same way the Bucs do and all of that. And so our first big pivot came when we began to try and scale our system, our playbook out to different types of customers. In the beginning, it was people I knew, people who knew me. It was word of mouth. And that was the first big pivot, trying to reproduce something that was very craft-based still across more than one client. And that kept us busy for the first 10 years. We got pretty good at it. We grew a fairly notable sized company, typically through partners and, again, people we knew in our network. But we had a lot of fun. We were having fun at the time. And really, honestly, our only goal at the time was we wanted to build software that mattered, because prior to starting the company, there were a lot of times I was asked to build software that I knew wasn't going to work. We're spending money. The company was spending money. And I was working at Beeline right before I, moved on, and Tracy and I created Feature. And it's interesting because I had some very strong notions about what good and bad were. And that all changed after you own your own business. You can go back and look at some of your previous leadership teams and go, okay, I understand why they did what they did. But the goal really was just to work with clients and build software that mattered. Really wasn't any bigger than that.
Yes, but you did a lot of that for local companies for the longest time. I know that there were some companies outside of the state of Florida that tasked you with building it, but there were a lot of the heavy support was done here locally. And over the years, you helped some people win some awards.
Yeah.
How'd that feel?
That felt great, actually. Especially, I think the one that stands out the most, Lynn O'Neill and the team at Suddath, they were trying to do something different. And that was really kind of up our alley. They had been challenged by one of their clients, bears the name Microsoft. And they took a step back and they took that challenge to heart, and they took a very innovative, very Silicon Valley approach, and we got to participate in that. And Paul Irwin, who's my CTO today, James Blair, and a few others, they got to really dig in on and solve a real business problem. And I remember when we built the first version of it, the initial feedback from inside the company was, there's no sizzle on the steak. Like the UI wasn't sexy. And, our statement was it doesn't need to be to solve the problem. And what was great about that particular project was as that project deployed and was utilized, the clients loved it. And then, of course, Lynn and that team, they ended up winning the award from the CIO.com. And it was great to see them get on stage and be able to get recognized really for being willing to take that chance. And what a lot of people might not know now, all these years later, that solution is actually seen as a standard in the industry. Their competitors all try to copy them. They try to use their contract structures. They try to look like them, but they don't have the platform. So yeah, that still feels good all these years later.
And that was built at Feature 23.
Yeah, that was built at the time. Suddath, we were all downtown. And so we were able to literally get on the Skyway and just go over to their office, spend some time, and then come back, or they'd come to our office, order food in. It was very collaborative. It was a fantastic project.
The Skyway is a pretty hot topic these days.
Yeah, it is a hot topic.
It is. But at least y'all got to get some use out of it. There's a lot of people that still don't even know it exists.
Yeah, well, it was Suddath and V Pizza. Very good reasons for us to use the Skyway.
He's good, man. Okay. Is the Suddath Award, the software you built for them, was that your favorite memory of the first iteration of Feature, the custom software iteration?
I would say that one other that stands out, and this other client, they're not in it for the awards. It was a kind of a founder type situation, and that's Superior Fence and Rail, also here out of Jacksonville.
Yep.
They came to us during that same time period, and they were just trying to create an operational differentiator. And they brought us an older piece of technology. But again, it was another organization a little bit more in the vein of what we're looking for today. They're now a mid-market player. They've developed an entire platform which really accelerated their ability to compete nationally. They're growing nationally. They're doing very well. And I would say those two stand out. Another probably small, third, little company called Drill Stack out of Texas. That team was trying to measure high school athletes, and they developed a mobile platform, even with like Bluetooth Low Energy into radar guns and stuff. And they were basically running mini high school level combines for football players and gathering data and trying to help those players measure and advance. And that was a lot of fun. That was a fantastic amount of fun.
All right. Shout out to all three of those companies.
Yeah.
The I always knew that there was a differentiator with Feature 23 and other software development firms, but I want you to talk about that. When you built Feature 23 and you listed out your hiring practices and your principles and what you wanted everybody to embody, what was it that you were like, if you want to work at Feature 23, these are the expectations?
It's fantastic. I'll share kind of 2 points that sum it up. Intellectual grit is the first one. What we do is not easy. It can be easy, but people don't hire Feature 23 to solve easy problems. So when we get hired to solve truly challenging, sometimes highly complex problems that haven't been solved before. And when we get brought in, somebody's job's almost always at risk. And so, the stakes are high. Intellectual grit, you got to be able to deal with the demands of the job. You got to be willing to be Michael Jordan and take the game-winning shot. Even if you miss, you got to be willing to. And when you miss, you got to come back and you got to get ready for the next shot. It takes a different type of, intellectual capacity to be able to deal with the wins and the losses at that level. Hearing your client say, because you failed, you put my business at risk. That's a tall thing to have to carry around. And you've got to be, capable and you got a desire to play at that level. I think the other one, and we actually say this in the interviewing process, people don't hire us because we love software. They don't hire us to try. They hire us to succeed. And so the mental model we give people in the hiring process is, we compare it to being a major league level sport like the NFL or Major League Baseball. We get hired to win the Super Bowl every year. And so you've got to come to work. You've got to train like you're going to win the Super Bowl. You have to practice like you're going to win the Super Bowl. You have to be the kind of teammate that helps each other win Super Bowls. And there's no off days because clients, again, stakes are high. And so to a lot of people, that sounds great in the interview until they come to work on day one and they see how we operate. Inside the company, we talk a lot about intellectual safety and imposter syndrome and helping people manage. There are days I come to work and the imposter syndrome sets in. Working with, we've got a young gentleman now who's working with us, young villain Suddath. We interviewed him and he said, hey, I just need a shot. And we interviewed him, brought him in, and he is on fire. And so I've got people who've been doing this 10, 15, 20 years, and he's giving them imposter syndrome. And that's playing at this level. If you get a rookie, you go back to Kobe Bryant. This kid came off the high school court and was making shots. Next thing you know, he's the center of the offense for the LA Lakers, right? That happens in software too. And so it's about winning at this level and doing all the little things that matter to win at this level. Those are I would say the two big attributes. Probably a close third, we actually believe in the academia. We believe in the reading of the books. We believe in all of the decades of research that went into the craft. We believe that stuff matters. And so we look for people who also want to learn that stuff. It's not as important to get started as it used to be, but as you grow in your skill set, you've got to understand the academia enough to utilize it when it's necessary. So.
How are you able to pluck it out in the interview process that they have? Because those are intangibles.
Yeah.
Those aren't like data-driven things where you say, hey, what's 2 + 2? There's something to it. So how do you...
We look for certain things. And again, I'll pick on villains because he's the most recent. We were in the interview and he said, hey, let me show you something. He stopped and pulled up something he had coded and demoed in the interview something that he had been building. One of the things we look for, especially in those in the junior range of experience, is, does the app even run? Sometimes when we have a question, we talk to somebody, maybe it feels like they might make it, we'll give them a coding exercise. And of course, at Feature, we pay people for their time on coding exercises. And so we want them to do a good job. So we'll pay them the 40, 50, 60 hours for them to put a coding exercise together. And invariably, it either runs or it doesn't. And the core metric is, does your app even run? And then we like to walk through the app with them. And you can tell somebody's relationship with the product they built, what they care about, what they focused on, what was important to them. Truth be told, the technical skills, that can be taught. I taught all my kids to program when they were, 10, 11, 12. Anybody can be taught to program, but building an app, building a platform, building something that others need to use or is going to be the foundation of a line of service, a business model. It's a different level of focus or passion. And you can see that in the interview with certain people. Ultimately, though, even if you like somebody, the only real way is to put him on the court like Kobe and let him play with the rest of the team and see, does he play well with it? Maybe he's making all the shots, but in a game time, is he making the plays that matter? You got to be able to put people in situations to see them play, to see like, okay, I see where they're at and I see where they need to develop. And then the rest is, you've got to develop the talent. We spend a lot of time focused on developing our people. I got a gentleman who's been with me several years at this point. I want to say 6 or 7. He still gets weekly mentoring from me personally. Sessions, we talk about things, we evaluate his performance. But it starts with just looking for those markers. Can they play at this level? Everything else is teachable. And we do look for coachability. Coachability is a big one. If you're not coachable, it really doesn't.
Yeah.
There are players out there that think they know so much they don't need coaching help. And they don't do well in our organization.
Yep. Okay. Here's another one for you. It was the time I was working out of the office and it felt so loose. It was just loose in there. And I remember asking like, how are you guys so just free? Like, why are y'all so like limbo-y? And they were like, somebody gave me an answer. It was, we all know what we're supposed to do and when we're supposed to do it and how we're supposed to do it. And when you know that the other person is going to do the job that they say that they're going to do, I don't have to stress about it. The way I took that was we all operate at such a high level that it's almost freeing because I know that the other people I work with are great too. And we're doing this iron sharpens iron thing.
Right.
How are you able to instill that culture? Obviously, the hiring process is super important, but once they get hired and they integrate, there has to be something about the culture that gets people to stay and feel good and work well with others. So how do you guys manage that?
Yeah, I think you're right. It starts with the hiring process. You're looking for certain things from people in the interviewing process. One of those things is that they do want to play this way. They want to play at this level. Like they genuinely want to and they're capable. The rest is really just building a program which allows them to play at this level while growing at this level. And we teach, what does good look like? We're big on heuristics. No two teams are the same. And you really have to focus on developing a team such that, I'll say I took this bit from the military. The military is very good at building teams, setting expectations, letting that team operate. And then the rest is you've got to get comfortable with the team's going to do it differently than you, and that's okay. So we've built a process around evaluating the team's performance. The team's built a process around evaluating the team's performance. And back to professional development, you just have to be willing to meet frequently and evaluate how are we doing relative to the program. If you look again at professional football, after every game, the players go in and evaluate film. We won the game. Maybe we even won the game big, but they still evaluate the film. Did I make mistakes? Could I be better? And our entire system's built on that continuous feedback cycle, at the individual, at the team, and at the corporate level. And the rest is we've got a really great relationship with our clients, which given the role we play, you have to. So we check in with our clients on a regular basis. Are we doing good? Are we delivering business value? Are we cost effective? Could we be better? If you can really marry the input from your clients with the capability of the teams, you can take a team of juniors, put them together, give them a system, and outperform anybody on the planet. It's really, again, looking at it through the eyes of the military, you take a bunch of high school kids, you run them through boot camp, and they can conquer the world with the right program. So it really genuinely comes back to the program we've developed over the last, 2.5 decades.
So in the year 2026, how are you able to maintain that in a remote environment now that you guys are out of the office?
That was hard. I will genuinely say that our culture had been built around like an in-person ability to read the room, read the people. Somebody comes in, you can see that they're tired. You can see that maybe they're not on their game. You can see that the team is struggling. I was big on walking around the office, walking into a team room and walking up to any random developer and saying, show me what you're working on. And it was a bit of a joke because 9 times out of 10, they were working on something and when they would run it, it would break. Well, that's all part of like getting people used to, always being in a ready to go state. And when you go to a purely remote culture, you have to rebuild that from the ground up. There's no substitution. There's nothing that even comes remotely close to what we used to have in the office. And it took us a good 2-3 years to rebuild our culture from a remote only perspective.
You couldn't walk up to people and say, show me what you're building, right? I guess at this point, it's like get them on a video call and have them share their screen or something. Is that?
So we facilitate collaboration using a remote room mindset. We still have teams. We do team huddles. We do them virtually. We're less concerned about seeing people on camera than some other organizations, but we do pretty much real-time huddles. We have office hours. And so if somebody has office hours that don't fit the rest of the team's aware of each other's office hours and they make it work. It goes back to, at the end of the day, everybody knows what it looks like. And so as long as they're developing and delivering against the good, you can pretty much sort the rest of it out. The hardest part was the mentoring, the teaching. You lose that hallway conversation opportunity. You lose the whiteboard opportunity. So our remote culture looks nothing like our in-office culture. I would say, though, after the 2 or 3 years it took us to get here, I think our capability as an organization is probably an order of magnitude greater than it was in person. And the difference for me is when you're in person, you can cheat. You can cheat. You don't have to focus as much on having an intentional culture as you do when you're remote. When you're remote, everything's intentional. Leadership's intentional, collaboration's intentional. You have to be very intentional about everything. When you're in person, a lot of that can be made up for accidentally. So it made us a better organization, made us focus and define things that we always took for granted before. But it was not easy. It took a good 2-3 years to like rebuild. I don't see us going back now because our capability is so much greater now. Going back to being an in-office organization feels a little bit like a handicap on the side of it.
Is that due to the fact that if you take away the commute, you take away the team lunches and stuff like that, that people can spend more time diving into code? Or what else would lead you to that?
Yeah, I would say, it's interesting. The commute typically wouldn't be an issue. It is in Jacksonville. The commute is a real contributor to mental health for many people. I would say that other things fit better for people than they used to. The big difference now is if somebody needs to take a kid to a doctor or go to the school for something, there's a whole lot more room in their life for things outside of work than there used to be. And then when people get comfortable with making their work fit their life, you acknowledge that the hours don't fit the same for everybody. And they might not fit the same on Wednesday as they did on Monday, but professionals make it work. They get their stuff done. They're good teammates irrespective of the hours. And once you finally buy into that and trust it, there's a lot more room in people's life for things not called work. And we've found that that's delivered greater value. The one thing I do want to acknowledge, for some, going to work was the ability to separate things maybe from a negative perspective in their personal life. Work became a bubble of safety. For those people who no longer had that bubble of safety, there really is no substitute. And we have had to deal with some of that. So we don't really have perfect answers for all of it. Yeah, for those where it really works, it's because they now have time for other things that they didn't used to, which is nice.
Well, I think it always goes back to making sure you're intentional about who you hire.
Yeah.
And from there, obviously, let the culture do what it's supposed to do. And then you'll have people that are doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's talk about feature 23 post-COVID.
Yeah.
So COVID was actually kind of good for you. And then it wasn't. And so, and that so many industries are like that. It's been the last 4 years have been something for a lot of us.
Yep.
So walk through the journey of 2020 to 2026.
Yeah. So right out of the gate, 2020, I mean, what a mind bender. We had just had a leadership summit and, we were watching the COVID maps like everybody else. And it went from a couple of dots in the Northeast to, wait, there's a couple of dots on the West. There's a couple in the South. And within weeks, we were shutting the office down like everybody else. We've always been a remote friendly organization, if not remote first. We were always big on, letting people work from wherever they wanted to. People would work from their vacation homes or, they would take a 2-week sabbatical. We even had some that would visit family in Europe and work. So remote was always adjacent. So right out of the gate, our system adapted well. The chaos within our client cultures, what it did was it forced a lot of companies to go through a series of adaptations very, very quickly. And as a partner, we were well positioned to help our clients go through some of that. So there was this, what was perceived to be a short-term problem. And then when it was clear that it was going to go from short-term to something that wasn't so short-term, that's when it got interesting because clients were like, okay, well, we don't know what the future looks like anymore. And companies started pausing. And that phone call went something like, hey, we need you guys to pause and be off the books in 30 days. You get one phone call, you get a second phone call. And then in the span of a few weeks, like 70% of your portfolio just hit pause. Like, this is going to be a problem. I would say at that point, though, we knew enough to know companies can't afford to shut down. Like, yes, we're all holding our breath a little bit, but we're going to have to work together to get through this. And our COO, Tracy, she pulled me aside and said, hey, I think what we need to do, we've got to start bringing something back to the conversation for our partners. And so she came up with a COVID rate card. This is a let's just keep the lights on rate card. You're trying to keep the lights on. We're trying to keep the lights on. None of us can afford to go dormant. So she came up with a COVID rate card and we started reaching out to our clients and saying, hey, even unsolicited, started saying, hey, we're going to put this project on a COVID rate card. Here's the impact. Here's what it's going to look like. And our clients were they were grateful, to say the least, because it allowed us to keep them in some conversations they wanted to stay in and reduce the cost down to like literally just paying for the bills. And that carried us through to the next thing, which ended up being the Great Recession, the Great Resignation. I would say from 2021 through about 2024, it was just straight up weird, Randall. It was weird. At the same time, interest rates were going up. Money was no longer cheap. There was no real incentive to innovate or invest, making it really hard. Fortunately, we had a group of clients who, come hell or high water, they also had to stay in business, and their technology was how they did it. So between the COVID rate card and those cornerstone clients, we were able to just get through. And then, of course, the LLMs woke up one day and clients were like, oh, how do we take advantage of this? And irrespective of their motivations, why they thought LLM was the savior to the organization, people started ideating again. How can we push innovation? How can we do more? AI, there was this promise that we could do more with the business model and not incur those costs. One of the big downsides to the Great Resignation, there was also the big, we'll call it the being held hostage period of corporate America. A lot of people don't, contextually don't realize that right before the Great Resignation, a lot of these corporates had just finished moving their work from offshore centers back to the United States. Well, then you've got the Great Resignation and you got developers demanding twice their pay, and companies didn't really have a choice. And so they ended up writing some very big checks. In some cases, checks they knew they couldn't cash long term. So over a period of years, AI came out of nowhere, and a lot of companies said, that's how we're going to get out of this. And so look at what we're dealing with now is maybe the long tail of a lot of decisions between 20 and 25. However you get here, all of a sudden AI is giving organizations the tool they need to be creative again. And whether they're getting pressured into it or their competitors are making them realize like, oh, we should get moving on this, the phone started ringing like aggressively in early 25, which led to kind of our current iteration, which is, we had to take a step back as a firm and say, okay, given what we learned between 20 and 25, we need to re-engage the market a little bit more intentionally, a little bit more deliberately. Who's the client that we always did the best with? Who's the client that we always were the most successful for? Who was the one that really needed us? And when the chips were down, with a client that we really helped out the most? Where is there the largest amount of symbiosis? And that was with the middle market. Those clients in the $150 to $500 million a year range. Those were the companies that were at most risk through 21 and 25. And those are the ones that we really helped out the most in that time period. So it really kind of cemented that irrespective of market conditions, that market was always going to need us and we were always going to need them. So we just doubled down and said, okay, moving forward, the middle market, that's our play. Those are the clients that need us. And that's where we really feel we add the most value, is for the middle market.
And are you doing anything different for them now than you did before?
No, honestly, it was really more about fit, right? Our process, even from the early days, was about efficacy. It was about precision. It was about ensuring that for every dollar invested, we're returning something back to the business in return for that. And when you look at who needs precision the most, it's the middle market. We've had some Fortune 500 clients, and we've always done well in that space. The difference, though, is they have a different incentive when they innovate. They've got a longer timeline. They're willing to even make mistakes financially. They're willing to maybe lose a little bit. So precision didn't matter as much to the Fortune 500. Also, when you look at your startup community, their job is quite literally to find their customers. So they're and this isn't the knock on the startups, it's startup life. We've had a lot of those customers. You binge spend. We think customer A, that market is our customer. We spend a lot of money to find out that segment doesn't want us. So now we got to start over and spend a lot of money going after segment B and then going after segment C. The startup customer is a roller coaster life, man. It's all or nothing. It's constant. You may or may not succeed, but precision really didn't matter to the startup community, right? Really, in many cases, what we tell startups is don't spend money on software. What you got to do is facilitate, fake it, create a bunch of screens that look like they're doing something until the customer proves they want it. You spend that money later. And so while we understand that business model, we're not really a great tool for the startup world. There's a lot of other things they should be doing besides building software. Way too often, the startup owners would say, well, the product's not ready. Well, you're bringing the wrong mindset to that. They're really, honestly, you should be embarrassed about the product that you take to market when you're looking for your customers as a startup. And that's really, so you spend a lot of time coaching, operations, leadership, not software. In the middle market, it's all about precision. They know who their customers are. They've got to get there better, faster, cheaper with a better product. They got to constantly deliver more business value so that they can compete against the Fortune 500s. It's all about precision. It's all about execution. Our model just does really well there. So it was really more about fit and accepting that we do well there. As a startup, though, it's difficult to turn away business. This last pivot, it requires that we say no to startups, which we do now. It requires that we turn away, Fortune 500 opportunities, which we do now.
You're firm. You're firm in the mid-market.
Firm in the mid-market. If you're not a mid-market and you don't have mid-market problems, we're probably not the right partner.
How are you guys handling AI adoption with the mid-market?
That question, research. It seems that a lot of companies have forgotten that they can research and that R&D is the classic activity used to answer questions, to get the intel you need to make better decisions. So for companies, and we've got a client right now that trusted us, went down the research path, and we've delivered a number of AI innovations. You start small and you build on that. And we've built a solution which is game changing by following the research mindset. If you jump off the cliff with both feet, we call that checkbox AI. You're checking a box off. Yep, we deployed AI, but it's probably not going to deliver the value you thought it was going to deliver to the business because it does require a lot of shaping, a lot of training, a lot of curation. So you've got to research. The other aspect of succeeding with AI, specifically in the middle market, and this isn't true of just AI, but the middle market, what they're great at doing is acknowledging their constraints. They know who they are. They know who they're not going to be. Research allows us to take who you are and marry it with the problems you're trying to solve. And then we can come out of that with something that says, based on who you are and the problem you're solving, AI can help here or here. And the middle market's very good at incremental value delivery. They're not waiting for the elephant to be swallowed whole. If you've got something ready to go that puts even $1 in the bank today, the middle market is ready to go right now. So you can incrementally roll out those innovations as you figure them out. And what you realize in the end is you end up deploying a number of small solutions with AI instead of one big massive solution. And over time, all of a sudden you've got these AI systems working together, delivering business value, and it gets easier and easier. But then they've built a foundation. Now they know how to look at it. Now they know what questions to ask. But you got to get there through a research-oriented mindset first.
What would you say the percentage is for the breakdown of how much of the work Feature does now, this software, custom software versus AI implementation?
I'll break that into two parts. There's using AI in our process to deliver solutions. And then there's delivering solutions that have AI built in, AI engineering proper. I would say right now, 100% of our organization is utilizing AI in the process of building. There's not a single part of the company that isn't leveraging AI to some extent. Building solutions that have AI in it is something that's picking up steam because we had to get past let's deploy this model, let's deploy that model. What can this model do? What can that model do? Once you figure out how to actually deploy solutions built with AI, and the biggest challenge isn't that we're not capable, it's that a lot of times the organizations who want this don't know how to think this way, right? And so they have to be taught. In addition to deploying, you have to teach them how to think that way. But you do it with a working model, not a pretty picture. And then once they see it, they go, oh, that makes sense to me. The one thing I'll say about most middle market executives, they're very, very intelligent. You give them good data, they're very good at asking questions. And if you give them good data, they know what problem they need to solve. And if you can quickly connect the dots for them, they'll get themselves there pretty quickly. But yeah, we're AI top down. There's not a single part of the organization which isn't using AI on some level. It's allowed me to, I would say, even just today, Randall, I used AI for about 6 hours while doing other things as part of our process. So now it is different.
Mm.
It's that when we talk about intellectual grit, the mental capacity, kind of we'll call it the acuity or the focus that's required to deliver this way is far different. It's not for everybody.
Are you guys using specific AI tools? Every day there's a freaking new one, man. Like, are you
Yeah.
guys using just like you would use as a Microsoft partner, you were using .NET Core. Is there
Yeah.
like an AI tool or a series or a suite of tools that you guys are
We-
all in on?
Yeah, we've built, so that it's interesting when you disconnect or separate from the model itself and you learn to build where the model is swappable, so to speak. We've reached a point where our system or our process allows us to swap models. Just like everything else, the models aren't always online. Claude's been having issues lately. So we've switched over to Codex and we've been using some of the Codex models. We're experimenting with some of the Gemini models because they've actually reached a point of like really interesting stuff. I would say the tool we're probably using the most of right now is Claude Code. Again, that particular Claude Code in that its manifestation is really kind of focused on firms like ours. Even our design team uses code in Claude. Open Code is a tool that's starting to roll out. We actually have an in-house tool, which I'm not ready to talk about, but a product management tool, which is allowing us to scale up. One of the biggest challenges when you're using AI models as a professional, it's an individual performance gain. So it's me working with Claude Code is me, that's an individual productivity gain. How do you scale working with AI such that the team is now gaining, the organization's now gaining, and the client as a whole is gaining? Scaling the benefit of the AI relationship is not an easy problem to solve yet. So we decided to solve it for ourselves. And so we're starting to roll some tools out which allow our clients to work with the same context that we're using. And the models are, they're being spun up on cloud infrastructure and solving problems relative to the context of the problem. So on one particular item, we may have 2 internal people, a designer, a product owner, a subject matter expert. We may have 7, 8 people touch that item in a single day. We may spin up and terminate 20, 30 agents in the process. And so I will say we're burning through tokens like nobody's business. We're okay with that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great, dude. There was something you told me on the phone the other day, and I wanted to make sure we got it on camera.
Yeah.
You said that at the enterprise level, they have some kind of like a subscription,
Yeah.
and it's not cheap, and then once it goes beneath a certain threshold, people really aren't having access to it anymore.
Yeah.
Can you just unpack that?
Yeah. So I'll pick on it. Gartner.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I'll pick one of my favorite clients who he's now retired. I would say he's now just a cigar smoking friend. We exchange notes on occasion. But Lynn O'Neill, Suddath at one point could have been defined as a middle market company. Lynn's got a ton of experience, though. He's worked in different organizations, Merrill, Deutsch. He's got a very big network. He's one of those that had a Gartner subscription. And he was able to take the published research that comes from Gartner and mold it to fit his needs within the Suddath organization. As he, from a day-to-day, from a framework, from a deployment, from a mental modeling, from a managing his board perspective, he was one of those who really knew how to wrangle every ounce of juice out of the Gartner and then let the rest go that didn't fit, didn't work. However, when you work with somebody who's got a Gartner subscription, you have to be very sensitive to the fact that Gartner did not write that for the middle market. They wrote it for the Fortune 500 and 1000. There are a lot of middle market companies who look at the Gartner posts on LinkedIn and go, wow, that's fantastic. We should be doing more of that. And when you try to apply that research to a middle market company, let's say a construction company in the $200 to $300 million a year range, the advice doesn't necessarily fit. And when you challenge Gartner on that, they say, oh, you can adapt it to fit. But it never really fits because, again, Fortune 500 companies have different constraints. They have different capital opportunities, devices, and tools. The middle market just doesn't have access to that kind of capital. And sometimes they don't have access to the time that takes some of that research to really marinate and evolve into something that's functional. So the Gartner research, as good as it is, it's like anything else. It often gets misapplied and it ends up causing more harm than good a lot of times.
What's the solution?
Well, my opinion, and I'm going to speak to it from a middle market perspective because that's where we really see it pay off for the middle market companies. Middle market companies really need to start by examining and achieving an element of shared understanding about the business model. There's this thing inside all organizations known as the understanding gap. There's what the executive thinks happens in the trenches every day. And if you walk down the hall and ask the person who does that job every day, they often say things like, yeah, we haven't done it like that in decades. We haven't done it that way in a long time. I think what most organizations should focus on first is really eliminating or minimizing the understanding gap. Do we all look at the business the same way? Does the business actually run the way we think it runs? Because otherwise, what you're going to do, you're going to take that Gartner research, and you're going to apply it to the model you have in your head, which isn't the organization you're running. The understanding gap is the actual biggest risk in most middle market companies. And if you can focus on minimizing or reducing that understanding gap, it never really goes away, but you can converge it more towards center for sure. At that point, once you've achieved shared understanding about this thing we call the business model, you can apply standard, traditional, good old-fashioned research against that and say, okay, well, if we want to solve this problem or access this market, what resources do we have in the organization? What skill sets do we have? What skill sets do we need to develop? At which point, then you can say, okay, well, does Gartner have anything to contribute to the strategy? But you can't bring Gartner in from the outside and expect that strategy to stand on its own if you've got an understanding gap within the organization. And I've had executives tell me we don't have an understanding gap. We have town halls every quarter. We talk about our goals once a year. We get up on stage. We fly everybody in. And I've been able to say, hey, let's run an experiment. And I ask 5 questions of the executives behind closed doors. And then I walk down the hall to a randomly selected group of managers, and I ask the same 5 questions. And then when I'm done, I put those up on the whiteboard side by side. And you might get a 30 or 40% overlap. So the understanding gap is always bigger than the shared understanding about the business model.
Is there anything that you as a person or Feature 23 as a company that would like to get broadcasted out over time to help the middle market understand the solutions that Gartner probably applies to the feature or to the Fortune 500s?
It's interesting. We've thought a lot about that. We actually just spent 2 years researching, trying to find resources that start with and end with the middle market in mind, and you really don't have a lot. The Ohio State University actually has a middle market focused program, research dedicated to the middle market. It's the only research of its kind that I can find that is wholly focused on the middle market. So what we're doing, we're hoping to just work with our clients in the middle market and start developing a bit of a body of knowledge, a body of science or art, if you will, for the middle market. And I don't think people spend enough time with middle market executives asking them, like, how did you overcome? I think we need to spend more time listening to those who've succeeded over the last 5 years. What did they do? I bet very few of them leveraged Gartner. And I bet some of them got pretty inventive about solutions within the organization. But we don't have anything. We're working on some stuff now. We're trying to distill down, we'll call it a set of heuristics that when we look back over the last 10 years within our network, what core pieces of advice actually moved the needle the most? What were our clients doing that set them up for success? Instead of worrying about, does it fit? Just listening, like, hey, how did you do that? How did you guys get through that? What was your strategy? What was your focus? How did the technology enable that? And it's interesting when you talk to people. I've got a few other clients, but when you talk to people like, Lynn O'Neill with all that experience, he's able to tell us very strategically, very precisely, I had to do this in this scenario and that scenario. If I'd done it in the other order, it would have both, blown up in my face. And so we're trying to learn as much as we are trying to distill, and we're trying to come up with a bit of a program or a guide for middle market executives. Try to reduce the failure rates to the extent that we can.
Okay. If you're an individual contributor and you're without a job right now, let's say you're a software engineer, that seems to be very practical at the moment. Why should somebody care about the health and success of a middle market company?
Resilience. When you look at the economy as a whole, the middle market is a foundation for just about everything that's fundamental to the economy. And, you read Peter Senge in The Fifth Discipline, and one of the things I learned when I read that book the first time is that the Fortune 500 is going to change. Those that were Fortune 500 are going to go back to the middle market. Those that are in the middle market are going to eventually rise, hopefully, and become part of the Fortune 500. The Fortune 500 is not, it's always going to be there, but it's just 500. You look at it as a stock index, it's only 500. A bulk of the businesses generating revenue in the country today, the economy, is in the middle market. And the success of the middle market is, in my opinion, And again, you're going to, for every unicorn you have in Silicon Valley, a lot of them die before they reach the middle market status.
Yep.
So there's a lot of churn below and there's a lot of churn above. And that's why we found it fascinating that there's really no focused research that helps the middle market. And there's a lot of middle market clients. I've got a middle market client right now that said they're happy at $350 a year. They have no desire to become Fortune 500. They're printing cash. They're happy. Their employees are happy. Their customers are happy. They see no point in breaking that model. So they just want to optimize and continue to build a healthy, happy culture moving forward. So there's a lot of money being made in the middle market.
If you had a client that was in the mid-market now and they graduated to the Fortune 500, would you kick them to the curb?
We don't kick them to the curb. I think what naturally happens, and it happened, I'll again pick on Suddath. They reached a point where they needed a different class of tool, and we're okay with that. If we help a client get to the Fortune 500 and they've got to trade up to a tool that, in many cases, Acodus is a partner of ours. They're a big organization. They have a lot of tools that look like my tools. They have some clients that will outgrow me, and they will need the tools that Acodus has. Our job is to help Acodus get that customer from where they are now to where they need some of Acodus's more geographically distributed solutions. So we openly work with our partners to help those companies reach that milestone. We celebrate anytime we can help a client break that ceiling and get into the Fortune 1000. It's a happy moment for us. Suddath, to this day, we're super proud of that project at Suddath. We haven't worked on that project in years, but it was the foundation of something very special for that organization. We're proud to be a part.
Good. Most important question I'm going to ask you today. Okay. I'm being serious. It is, if you were a computer science major in college right now and you're graduating or you recently graduated or you're about to graduate and you see what's in front of you, it's probably daunting. Honestly, it's probably overwhelming. There's probably a lot of fear in the fact that maybe there's not a job out there for me. If Mike Potts was 22 years old right now, going through college, graduating from you and entering into this new world, what would the best piece of advice, what could you tell Mike Potts' 22-year-old version right now?
Embrace the tooling. Embrace the tooling. Don't try to fall victim to doing it the old way. Don't let others tell you. Don't fall into this romantic, I'm going to hand code everything kind of mindset. The mental model I'm giving everybody, in my own organization even, is that of the $59 oil change. You know, when I take my car to the oil change place and I pay to get an oil change done, I expect it to take about an hour and cost about $59. Well, the only thing that's really changed is that an oil change now can get done in, an hour, and it's still going to cost $59. You got to be a part of helping cars get changed in an hour for $59. AI tooling now sets the standard. And if you tell me that you need 10 hours to do something that I know I can do in Claude Code in 30 minutes, I can't hire you. Like, it's unemployable. You've got to embrace the tooling. The tooling is there. And I would pair that with, I was an art history major. I was actually a classically trained artist. And as part of the art history studies, if you go back a ways, there was this moment in construction where the arch was invented by the Romans using this thing called cement. If you look at architecture before the arch, it was beautiful. The Pantheon and some other very beautiful structures. But without the arch, you couldn't build the Colosseum. The arch enabled things that weren't possible before the arch. AI is our arch moment. We're going to build things of such amazing complexity and beauty that we couldn't conceive of before, and you won't be able to do that without AI. What we need is people to start thinking more creatively about the possibilities of the tooling. You got to embrace it.
Are the universities doing anything to help them embrace it?
And that's a tough question.
Oh, that's my thing, though. If I'm a senior and I take the advice you just gave, which is great advice, and you're saying to embrace it, but they're not telling me about it or teaching me about it, I have to take it into my own hands.
So I got to give a nod to my university partners out there, Dr. Sharif Karthik. There are people in the university system who are and have been for a long time finding those angles to advance the resources they give their students. We have to acknowledge that the university system is locked by its curriculum. But that doesn't mean that the universities and the professors out there in the programs aren't finding things to bring additional resources to those students. We just had it was a hackathon that one of my principal here in Jacksonville, Joe Short, went and was a mentor for the AI-focused hackathon. as long as universities continue to do that, and you've got people like Karthik and Sharif out there constantly inventing programs that go above and beyond the curriculum, that's what you're looking for if you're a student. You're looking for programs that are going above and beyond, that are bringing those resources. There's a reason why we continue to work with UNF students. Even now, they're a cut above. They're coming out prepared for, and we're able to deploy UNF students very quickly within our system because of how UNF approaches it. It's not easy for the universities. I think the real challenge isn't the university so much as it is the university system in this country. Unfortunately, it's a large constraint. We've got people like Karthik out there at UNF right now who's constantly looking for new ways to advance opportunities for students to get them ready for employment, and it's working. I wish he had more resources, honestly. If I could rate anybody $1 million to invent a program right now, it would be Karthik.
Yeah.
Guy's amazing.
He is. I've met him a few times. He's
early
great.
in that program, I got to give him a shout out. Early in that program, way back when, the senior project, before it was the senior project, Karthik was spending his own time, his own money, getting people together. He was writing his own checks to start laying the foundation for that program for what it is today. Without that individual passion, focus, to kind of see what the future could hold, I got to give Karthik a lot of individual credit for wanting to be one of those types of teachers.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Karthik.
Yeah.
Do you or anybody in the software development space at the C-suite level and above, collectively or individually, do you guys feel an ethical responsibility to prepare the current wave of students for this AI futuristic world?
That's tough. I would say ethical responsibility is a big weight to bear. I would say, how would I reframe that? I would say at some point, we've got to figure it out. At some point, we got to figure it out. My personal opinion, I would say that the craft had allowed an element of mediocrity that needed to be called. If you look at it as a profession, you can't very well have doctors out there that are making people sick instead of making people better.
Yeah.
I would say there's a large part of the problem in our space, the technical debt, the failures on projects, which do come back to a matter of professionalism, efficacy, and incompetence. Because we never really gravitated to a point where we were able to standardize the profession, it's difficult to answer that question because without, professional standards, it's difficult to set that bar and say, you will perform at this level. Unfortunately, it's happening so fast that most of us in business are still figuring it out. I'm not going to sit here and presume to say I know how to figure it out for everybody out there. Like, we're still swimming for shore, baby. Like, I don't know what it looks like yet, but I got a group that finally made it behind me. We're not quite to shore yet, but we're close.
I wrote an article, I posted on LinkedIn, that I asked whose weight is it to bear?
Yeah.
Because it's not the 21-year-old that was told to go to college and did.
Right.
It's not their responsibility.
Right.
Well, it's not their fault. It is going to be their responsibility, but it's not their fault. So I said, does that weight bear on corporate America, who has by and large eliminated the entry-level job, right? If you're between the ages of 20 and 24, the unemployment rate's like 12.4%. It's pretty high. Is it the university system, or is it the parents? And let me give a little context. The university system for me is, if I'm paying you $20,000 a year to prepare me for the real world, that means over the course of 4 years, I gave you $80,000 to prepare me for the real world. You should probably prepare me for the real world. So I do believe that they have a responsibility. And then for the parents, if you have a college level or college age student that you're a parent of, chances are you're old enough to be in middle management or above.
Yeah.
And you should have a decent enough picture of how the world is working, at least in corporate America or in your vertical, to give some decent advice. So I'll just preface it to you. Corporate America, university system, parents at home. How do we navigate those three things to help these young individuals who are going to shape the next generation?
Again, it's going to be tough because this thing happened that nobody, as much as we say, and we've been saying for nearly 2 decades that AI is coming, AI is coming, AI is coming. It showed up one day and it became a force that has basically changed everything. I think collectively, the parents are going to have to take a step back I think corporates are going to have to, I think we're all just going to take a giant step back and deal with the giant WTF in the room and figure it out. In the meantime, it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to suck. I don't know that I have a quick solution for it. I would say this, my honest opinion, I think there's an element of our economics and the economy of this country that has to play a role. Comes next is going to be so significant and require so much focus that we're all going to have to work together on this one, including the government and the economy. There's going to have to be something that creates a new path forward. I don't know what that looks like. I will say the current system's probably not sustainable, but I don't know. I think we're still in the volatile period of figuring it out. Again, we're all kind of still swimming to shore. I don't think the story's written yet. I don't know what it looks like 12 months from now or even 6 months.
Here's a topic. We're not going to talk about it now, but our next conversation is current students, unemployed, like not knowing what their future looks like in a social media era with the mental health crisis that's going on. Yeah. What's going to be, how do we prevent catastrophe?
Uninstall TikTok, uninstall social.
We'll talk. That's a much broader conversation. I'll bring it back. You founded Feature in Jacksonville, Florida.
Yeah.
2008. You're 18 years with this being your headquarters. I'm going to ask you some questions about Jax.
Yep.
You've been a little critical.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll ask this and we'll see what the answer is. But what is the city of Jacksonville doing well for small business?
I think they do a really good job ignoring small business, is my honest answer. I think we've had an office downtown for a long time. I spent a lot of time downtown asking, because I am so critical. We've been invited to focused study groups, where first we're looking at Charlotte as an example of what good could look like. We're looking at Austin. We're looking at all these other places. And, that we don't really ever take a step back and just examine ourselves. We don't have the same constraints or resources that Charlotte and Austin do. My kind of experience here is, I guess I'll just be candid. The focus really isn't on small business. It's not on business development at all. We're worried about keeping Everbank downtown. We spent, I don't know how many tens of millions, and now that's unraveling. Anybody who owned a business in downtown or is invested in being a business owner in the downtown region, I can tell you the real sentiment on the street is nobody gives two shits about that. Like, we spent a lot of money that could have developed downtown on keeping Everbank, one business. The business development focus, we're a small business community. We're a middle market community. Yes, we've got a couple of the Fortune 500 here, fortunately, but we've really never worked together as a city. There's business development happening. My experience is you got people like Shad Khan willing to invest in the community, build it up, and all I see is the city fighting with Shad. And instead of like creating a partnership that says, hey, how about we sit down and figure out how to take what you're already investing in, let us invest some, build something together focused on what we have, the middle market. Intuition's now selling. You got Bellwether's closing.
That's the one that hurt. I was going to bring that up because you and I have eaten there. Bellwether, that one hurts. It hurts more now because Black Sheep closed.
Yeah.
And Bellwether was like, okay, we're going to close Black Sheep, but we're going to keep Bellwether.
That was in our office building. That was a big reason. We loved that office building.
Bread and Board went away. Intuition. It's not just the small businesses that are hurting. It's restaurants and where what people would consider their third place.
Yep.
Okay. So unfortunately, you don't see them doing too much for the small business. So what can they do? What should they do?
I'm going to say what I said twice before, because I still think it's the right thing to do. If I were running any part of the business development in the city, I would have called Khan and the Jaguars and said, hey, can we throw an event at the stadium? And I would have personally gone around and met as many of the business owners as I possibly could have. I would have walked, shook hands, talked to people who are investing in the city now without any financial support or incentives, people really taking a shot on the city. Find those people taking a shot on the city. Throw a party at the Jaguar Stadium, get on stage and just simply say two very powerful words. Thank you. What can we do to help you succeed in Jacksonville? We've got to find a way to get the people already investing in the city to work together with the city. And I don't mean with all these, like, I don't need the chamber mafia chasing me down for a check. I don't need all of that. What I need is I just need all of the people who actually want to see the city move forward in one place where we can work together on a plan that moves us forward. It starts by thanking all of those people who continuously take a shot on the city. Because every time it doesn't go south, every time we close a bellwether, every time we close a black sheep, those are the people that get punched in the gut.
Yeah.
They've been investing for 10 years on the promise that this was going to get turned around. What do we talk about? We talk about the trio. We talk about Everbank. We talk about the same old shit we've been talking about for 20 years. The city isn't moving forward. We talk about South Bank. We talk about being healthy city. We talk about all this shit. And we talk about the trail. If you go down to Dunedin, outside of Tampa, they have a version of the trail. They've got small business all along the trail from north to south, all the way down to Clearwater Beach. It is the most active, most vibrant part of Dunedin City, and it runs right through downtown. Because those businesses got together, worked with the city, and developed that program to move it forward. They didn't need to go look at Charlotte. They didn't need to go look at Austin. They just needed to set about business. It starts by pulling those people together and saying, thank you. How do we work together to do better? It's really not any harder than that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Where can people buy a hat like that?
This one I got in Wyoming. I got this in a real cowboy shop in Western Cody, Wyoming.
When you go back out on your tour in the country again, like, you going to bring me one of those?
Hell yeah, I'll bring you one.
Okay.
I tried to buy one for Joe Short, but his noggin's so big.
It's huge.
They said he'd have to go to the factory.
And what's weird is every time I compliment him, I see it grow a little bit. It's so weird.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if the city's not going to thank you, I'm going to thank you. Obviously, for your partnership and your friendship over the last almost decade. But this is a small business podcast, Pioneers and Builders in Jacksonville. And the reason I want to sit down with people and talk to them about these things is because beyond you, you're responsible for people being able to put a roof over their head and food on the table. And I'm fully aware that there's days where things probably seem insurmountable, or you're overwhelmed, or a client left and you're like, how in the hell am I going to pull this off? And then you dig deep and you do it because you have a responsibility to the people that work underneath you. For that alone, I thank you. And I also thank you for being on PB and Jax and sharing 20 years worth of experience with me and hopefully educating somebody today.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Randall. Thank you very much, brother.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.